If you want to have 20 million requests a day, you will be spotted by the antibot. It's impossible. So the goal is to push far the detections. So to stay a maximum below the radar, but you will be detected and you will be blocked. So you switch to another session, IP address, whatever. And you maximize the number of requests. That's what you can do clearly when you are doing a lot of billion of requests.
Hi everyone and welcome to Scraping Insights, a series of video interviews curated by the Web Scraping Club. Today we have Fabien Vauchelles, an expert antibot bypassing and creator of Scrapoxy. We'll see together how to create a proxy waterfall for your scraping projects, and Fabien will give us some tips for creating the perfect undetected scraper.
This interview is brought to you by deobuscation.com, a marketplace for web data.
Bonjour Fabien, comment ça va?
Buongiorno, Pierluigi, tutto bene?
Great. So happy to have you here because you're a part of your kindness. You're one of the most expert person in the antibot detection industry. I've seen your talks around, your webinars, and they are also great. So I wanted to have you here and share some ideas and expertise with you today. So for the few people who don't know you, would you mind to introduce yourself a bit, your career, your projects, and so on?
Yes, for sure. So thank you very much to invite me. That's an honor to be on the web scraping video. So I've got an engineering background. I'm passionate about development for more than 30 years. You know, when you grow with a computer when you're a child. So you learn to understand what's behind that, what's inside the computers. I'm not so interested in video games, by the way. I'm interested in how things work, network protocols, computer architectures, this kind of stuff. I've got an engineering degree in France. I'm also based in Paris. And so I love to create product, computer stuff, software also. That's why I founded by the past 3 companies. But now I'm more focused on web scraping stuff, things that I'm doing for 10 years, more than 10 years now. And 8 years ago, I created one software, open source software, which is called Scrapoxy. And I created that because I was doing a lot of web scraping, and there were a big issue to solve. How can you get many IP address, cheap IP address? I was poor at this time, you know, you don't have so money. You cannot go to proxy services and say, okay, I will give you $24 for gigabytes. So no, that's not possible. So I was starting to launch virtual machines on Amazon, install proxies, this kind of stuff, and it was a pain in the ass to maintain that. So I created a script called Scrapoxy, which starts a VPS on Amazon, stop them, get new IP address at each time routing the traffic, and it grew. I added a lot of cloud provider, GCP, OVH, whatever, DigitalOcean, and now I'm adding proxy services like Brightdata, Rayobyte, you know, all these famous names.
But that's interesting because exactly, I think 10 years ago, we did internally in my company almost the same because we had the same issue. And we started to distribute our scraping activity in hundreds or thousands of virtual machines that are spawned and killed when the scraping does stop. Yes. In your case, it's even more interesting because you decoupled the computing from the networking. Because in our case, the scraper is executing in the virtual machine that gives the new address. Mm-hmm. While in your with Scrapoxy, you can decouple the computing from the networking. And that's very interesting because today we are using Scrapoxy internally to solve this issue. And at least for some providers, it gave us the chance to save some money. And it's always easy when you save some money. So it's nice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now you mentioned that you're working with different proxy provider. It works only with data center proxies or other proxy types. How many proxy provider you have today?
I didn't count, to be honest. It's more like 20 that I have. But yes, also we can say there is a zillion of proxy providers. Why aren't you supporting everyone's? The difficulty to integrate proxy services or cloud provider is that no one has the same way to manage a proxy. Thanks, guys. That's the issue. And so that's why every time I'm integrating a providers, I need to write a specific connectors. On cloud providers, also, it's, you need to stop the instance. You need to install the softwares. So it's a different way on each provider to do that and to manage that efficiently. And so there is a lot of security issue. There is also documentation to write. So I have to spend a lot of time. To give you some example, for Azure, it takes me a full-time 1 month to write the Azure connectors because it's very difficult to manage Azures. And on proxy services, also, you can say, okay, it's very easy, proxy services, because you have the IP address, the port, username, and password, and let's rock. But no, in fact, if you want to have all the features of Scrapoxy, like sticky sessions, rotation managed by Scrapoxy, Scrapoxy use sticky session from the proxy providers. And also it can rotate IP address in your pool and rotate in an ISP pool. So you need to have access to API to the proxy services. And of course, they are not following the same rule to write APIs. So you have to write that, to test the stability, to manage all the errors, the different heterogeneous errors, and to bring that in one cup and have the same mold for everyone. So you can plug your spider on one API, which is Scrapoxy, and after you don't manage everything. I'm handling everything. All the different part of the rotating, the smart stuff.
Yes, that's the greatest.
That's the difficulty.
Yes, that's the greatest thing of Scrapoxy, because, as you said, that there are zillions of proxy providers, and if when your number of providers that you are using in the company grows, it becomes an hell to watch 10 different dashboards to understand how many gigabytes are you using per provider, how many requests you're doing per providers. So it's a great idea to unify everything on one API call to Scrapoxy and one dashboard for visualization, your effectiveness of the scripting operation. And speaking of which, I want to ask you, I suppose that the choice of a proxy provider is something that must be done carefully, because different proxy providers, I suppose, have different success rates and can have a great impact on your scripting operation. Do your customers have this feeling also using Scrapoxy?
Yes, and the recurring question is which provider should I use? No, to be honest, is which cheapest provider can I use for this website? And there is no real answer on that. It depends on the website and what you're doing. If you are doing automation, you are doing web scrapings, if you're doing social platform stuff. So it depends on the providers. There is globally some providers which are very bad, so you shouldn't use them. And there is very good providers for every use case. And as you can imagine, good providers are expensive, for sure. So how can you choose in the middle of that not so expensive providers which can solve your issue and have a good success rate on this website? And that's why also Scrapoxy is good at that. It gives you the success rate by proxy. So you can add multiple providers, test different websites, and check the success rate on the providers. That's a good part of Scrapoxy. And in the future of Scrapoxy, it will handle that automatically. So imagine that you are targeting an e-commerce website. Scrapoxy will test all your providers and progressively route to the set of providers which are very good for this website. But imagine that you are plugging another spider for another website, perhaps which is traveling websites, and he will redo the same work, testing all your provider and have another set of provider for this website. And he will do that automatically. So you don't have to find the good success rate. And also that's very interesting because sometimes I'm discussing with proxy provider and they say, oh, you should use only me. And that's not something I'm advising, because imagine that tomorrow the provider is blacklisting you or blacklisting your targets. You need to rewrite everything or to find another one. So you should at least have two providers, at least two, perhaps three, and what I'm advising, perhaps have 10 providers. Mixing data center proxy, ISP, residential, and use also these different providers depending on the success rate. So you try with data centers. If it's not working, you go to ISP proxy. If it's not working, you go to residential and you pay by gigabyte. But you want to avoid to pay and to burn all your credit on the gigabyte subscriptions.
Yes, that's the question I wanted to ask you now. Let's say I'm a company that is, I run a company when we are starting today a large web scraping project. What would you suggest for as a proxy strategy to approach this project?
Yes, a lot of users also use Scrapoxy with free proxy lists. So let's exclude that because it's more for personal project or something like that. So imagine that you have commercial product, and as you said, you want to have a large strategy. So you install Scrapoxy, and it will give you data center proxy first. And it's very easy because you just add your credential on AWS or GCP. It's very different than going to proxy services and using data center proxy from them. Here, you are doing your own private proxy pools, and it's very easy. And with that, you have data center, you have proxy that just start when your scraping session starts, and they shut down when your scraping session stop. So you just pay during these sessions for that. And after, perhaps that you have not so good success rate on this data center proxy. It's cheap, okay, but success rate is not so good. So you can add another proxy services type on Scrapoxy. You add a connector, perhaps with Brightstar, Rayobyte, whatever, and you upgrade that. And on your spider, perhaps you have different projects. You have a data center project, on ISP project, residential project, and the spider will test first data center proxy on Scrapoxy. It's not working, okay. Going to the second project with ISP proxy. Okay, not good success rate. Let's move to the residentials. So that's how you build your strategy. But don't try unblocker at the beginning, unless you don't want to do web scrapings. That's also an option. But if you want to manage the whole stack, start with data center.
Yes. One other issue I see when we use a different proxy provider is, or we need to choose a proxy provider, is comparing prices between every different proxy provider. Since they have different models, they have different prices, offers, let's say plans that you need to subscribe and pay, or even pay credits, and then you need to calculate how many credits you are using for. Yes, that's crazy, and
Yeah.
I imagine they don't have any API to keep track of this, because it would be great if in Scrapoxy you also integrated the pricing.
Yeah, I've got some question about that. Can you help me to calculate my cost? I can do that on cloud providers, but on proxy services, it's completely different. And yes, I assume that you have this issue. And also the beauty is when you are discussing with them, the price is different, because what you can see is public price. And if you are discussing about volume, they can give you more gigabytes, discounts, whatever. So there is so many ways they calculate. You can have pay as you go. So pay as you go is you use by gigabytes. Or you pay for perhaps 50 gigabytes, and you have a very good price for that. Sometimes you pay by IP, and it's unlimited by gigabytes. Sometimes you pay by IP, and you also pay by gigabytes. So yes, it's a complete mess to understand the pricings. But what my strategy when I'm adding a provider is not to look at the price at the beginning, because honestly, on good residential provider, they have globally the same price. Same for ISP and same for data centers. Data center use Scrapoxy for that. So you plug the provider on a trial, and you test how many gigabytes you consume, and you will have your real answers. How will it cost on these providers?
Yes, you're correct, because also thanks to Scrapoxy, you can understand how many gigabytes you are going to use. Because another thing we had to build in-house in my company was to log the gigabyte used by in Scrapy, most of cases, to save this information that is on the log of Scrapy at the end of the execution, because otherwise you don't know how much it will cost to you to add a proxy to a spider that until yesterday it didn't need any proxy. Or if you must upgrade to mobile proxy or residential proxy, it's you need to be aware of what you're spending.
And it's difficult also. I know that on Zeit APIs they have a cost calculator, but also it's very difficult to anticipate, because when you imagine that you are using their unblocker, it depends if behind they are using residential or not, if I'm remind correctly. So you cannot really know the real cost.
Yes, also if they are rendering JavaScript or not, depending on the difficulty of the website, they charge you more or less, depending. I think from the computing they need to bypass. That's brilliant, because it gives you flexibility, but it's a hell to understand how much you will go to spend for a whole website.
Yeah, and it can be a real cost for a company, because sometimes you can lower the cost to perhaps €1,000 a month. So that's okay for companies. But sometimes it perhaps 100 more. You can have between 10 or 100,000 of euro per month in scraping costs, depending on your use case. So yes, that can be very complex to anticipate that.
Yes, even because more or less, if I remember correctly today, mobile proxies are at around $40 per gigabyte, more or less, or 20. I don't remember, 20 or 40. I think 40.
Between 20 and 40, yes.
But residential are around 7. So if you need to upgrade from residential to mobile, you're paying at least 3 times more than you're actually using.
Yes.
And it's becoming quite expensive game thanks to the antibot solutions. And speaking of which, I wanted to, since you're an expert in the anti-detection, antibot, anti-detection, or whatever it's called, our skills, I wanted to deep dive a bit more with you how to create the perfect bot, the one that is not detected by an antibot system. Let's start from the basics. We talked about the IP proxies. I think one of the key elements is a part of choosing the right proxy provider for the target website. Also, the IP quality of the provider give you. Do you mind sharing your expertise in the different unblockability type of the different proxies? Let's say residential proxies are more reliable than data center, then mobile are more unblockable for different reasons and whatever. If you want to share with us your points of view.
Yes, for sure. And that's a very interesting question. I saw that you asked also that to Antoine. So that's very interesting. We can say, okay, let's use residential proxy because it's a real user IP address. But in fact, it's not a matter of, building the best stack. You won't use the best bot, the latest technology, if in front of you don't have so much advanced technology in terms of anti-block technologies. So perhaps data center IP is sufficient, and having multiple IP address. So it's a rate limit in front of you. You can use that. And what I saw in use case, it depends on the target. When you have a lot of website to target, imagine that you have 100 website to target. Okay. On this 100 websites, you will have 80 websites which are not very well protected. So you will use a basic data center proxy. But on the remaining 20 websites, perhaps you will have some commercial protections or custom mode made protection by perhaps a 20% team behind. So this time you need residential proxy. You need to have a stack with a custom browsers running perhaps on Windows virtual machines. I don't know, something very advanced. But the more layers that you add in your scraper make unstable your scraper. So if you are using Chrome, you know that Chrome have a lot of memory leak. So you have to restart a lot of time your Chrome or your VPS. So that's a big issue to manage and so on. So you want to avoid all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we started from the IPs, then we need to create the request. So we need to connect to the target website via the TLS layer. So sometimes this is an issue. When it is an issue from the scraping perspective, and when it's not, and how we can mitigate this issue.
So the TLS part, when you are connecting to a website, your scraping library negotiate protocol, encryption protocols. So there is a signature because your library is sending the list of supported protocol by this library, and the website just look at this list and find, okay, this one is secure and I can use this one because I implement this protocol. So let's use together the same protocols. And on this list, the list is very specific to the implementation on the client side. And so you can fingerprint that, and the server receiving this list and this set of options can say, okay, it's a Python library in front of me. So I'm sure that's automations. So the thing is, how can I change this list? So yes, you can send another list, in fact, to the server and to send the same list than Chrome. That's possible to do that. But the difficulty, if imagine that you are sending the same list in Chrome, and in front of you the server select a protocol that you are not supporting, because if you are sending a list which is a Chrome list and not the Python list, perhaps there is protocols that you are not implementing. So if the server say, okay, you should use this protocol, and you say, oh, I don't have the implementations, that's an issue. That's why it's sometimes difficult to have a good fingerprint and send the good list, because you need to send a list which can be also used, in fact. So there is library to do that. In fact, there is the curl CFFI library, which is an implementation of curl where you can modify the TLS. And there is a lot of on-top library in Python also. In Node.js, you can by default modify the cipher suite also. But that's the same problem that I told you. You can send the list that you want to do, but in fact, if the server is replying you, I want this protocol, and you don't have this protocol implemented, the connection will fade.
Yes. In fact, you mentioned the curl CFFI. At least in Python, on top of this package, there is a scrape impersonate that basically gives you the ability to send and receive a response, send request and receive a response, like impersonating different browsers, or more even mobile browsers or desktop browsers. I found it very useful in many different cases where there is an antibot, but it's not so implemented, so not so at a higher level of security.
Right.
And then also, given the networking layer in the TLS layer, we need to create a plausible request. So we need to send a plausible set of headers of requests. What should care about forging our request headers? The order, the matching with the different parameters and so on.
Yes, when you send the HTTP request, so in the HTTP protocols, you have a lot of header before sending the what you want to have, and after the server reply with HTML, CSS, JavaScript images. So this header must be the same than a real browser, so you should have the same signature, in fact. And yes, that's very interesting because you say order and you say that, and in Python, in fact, you are with Scrapy, with request, you are sending a dictionary. And on a dictionary, you cannot control the orders. And also, that's very fun because some library in Java can send multiple times the same header, content type, by example. So you have three content type in the request. So that, and the order is different. So you try to emulate that with Python, but it's very different because you can only send one content type and you cannot manage the order. Also, you have the case which can change. Python reformat the case. So it's not the same. So if the antibot is comparing character by character as the header, yes, there is a lot of difference and you can identify bots.
And what's the solution for this issue? Because honestly, I never stopped thinking about it, but it's an issue. How can we send requests that don't change in Python if there's the possibility?
What I'm trying to do is to use another library. Perhaps I think it's curl FFI. They are implementing that. So they are rewriting the whole HTTP part with C++ library. So you're not using the implementation from Python, and you can set the orders. Also, it's not a dictionary, it's an array. And so you can have the orders that you want. You can have multiple headers. Yeah. So in fact, you need to rewrite all this stack, all these components. So if someone is doing that, I'm interested.
Great. And then one of the major doubt we have when creating the scrapers and is, should we go browserless, like with Scrapy, or with some browser automation tools like Playwright, Puppeteer, whatever? And when using one, when using another, what are the pros and cons of each solution?
Yeah, in fact, you interviewed Antoine and Nick, and they say now Puppeteer Playwright is detected. So, yeah, he's very strict to do that, to be honest. But if you are starting with Browserless, clearly Puppeteer Playwright Selenium will be detected, and detected with high red flags. So it's useless to get them. You can use other type of automation, undetected Chrome browser, which leave less red flag in the code. And also you can use custom browser like GoLogin, multi-logins, because they get the source code of Chromium, in fact, or Firefox. They modify the behavior in the source code, and they provide you another compiled browsers which can get rid of these tracking signals. That's, I think, the best solutions to do that. There is also, in fact, a big issue. When you are using automations with Puppeteer Playwright, what you want to do is to package them inside a Docker. So it's packed in a Docker. So it's Linux. But in fact, Linux is 2% of the connections. So you perhaps try to have a Windows signatures. And trying to have to change a parameter to emulate a Windows signature is very difficult. So the best solutions is to use a Windows VPS and run inside this Windows VPS this browser. And in fact, when you are looking to a lot of custom browser, they are not supporting Linux. They support only Windows, and that's the reason, because, to be honest, running that on Linux, you will be detected. So I think in the future, we'll have more and more VPS on Windows and stuff running on Windows. So everything back in Docker will be stopped.
Yes. I agree with your view. Sometimes it's not enough to use Windows because, if you run your Playwright solution on Windows, on a Windows server, then the fingerprint shows also that you are on a server, because you don't have any audio device, you don't have any video device. Yes. The WebGL usually is that uses the CPU. Yes, because you don't have a graphic card on a server. So these are all red flags for the antibots solutions. On the other side, you have, you don't have to manage the TLS layer because you are using a real browser. Yes, there are some cons because you also, of course, you have the JavaScript rendering engine built in the browser, so you can bypass some challenges. But the fact
Right.
also is that you cannot scale too much with your scripting operation because it's very compute intensive. You have a real browser window, and you can have hundreds of window browsers inside a single machine.
Yes.
And also, if you need to use Windows machine, they are more expensive usually than Linux machines on.
Right.
So it's very expensive.
It's difficult balance to find the right solution. Should I go on a complex stack which can be expensive, so the request will be expensive at the end, or should I try to use a direct request and try to emulate Windows parameters? So which one should I use? To be honest, it depends on the website and the antibot protections that you have in front of you. And it was interesting also when you asked the question to Nick, say there is two types of bots. So you have the scraping bot and you have the sneaker bots. And the sneaker bot, they don't want to go into the puppeteer playwright stuff. They want to do direct requests because that's the speed, which is important. So they try to reverse engineering protection to understand how to bypass. But on the web scraping part, we have time, to be honest, to execute the request, and we can parallelize the number of machines to do that. So we can have a window stack, etc. But the caveat of that is the price of the request. So yes, you're right. And so it fully depends on how much money you want to spend to get a request and how fast and how much request you want. What I'm saying is, always how much request do you want to do today? And if you say me, okay, I want to do 1,000 requests, you say, okay, let's do that. But when you're saying, I want to do 20 million requests today, yeah, we need to set up an architecture to determine which target you are doing, collecting, and how we can bypass the antibot protections, and etc.
Yes. And speaking of browser automation tools again, lately there have been some discussion about the CDP protocol inside this playwright, puppeteer, and so on, since it's getting more and more diffuse the signals to detect these browser automation tools for antibots. And in fact, I've seen that some of the scrapers we wrote, they broke because they cannot bypass more the antibots. I've seen that the open source community is taking this issue with some other packages. As an example, no driver. Have you had the chance to test it? Have you seen other solutions that are tackling this approach of the CDP?
To be honest, I'm not tackling the issue like that. I'm more doing what the sneaker is doing. It takes more time, it takes more investment, but to be honest, it's far more interesting to understand. So what I'm advising to people is to understand, to try to deobfuscate source code and to understand how an antibot is working. So what are the signals they are monitoring, how they are doing that, calculation, on which purpose. It's so interesting to try to get in the head of the guy. So, and what you can do at the end when you're successfully doing that, you can forge the payload. So, okay, they can detect whatever they want, but at the end, you will send the signal that you want. So, it's a different approach. Yes. So in fact, I'm using Puppeteer without still plugin, because at the end it can be detected. Okay, but I'm sending the payload that I want.
Understood. And is there the chance that when the antibot changes, that all the work you made to deobfuscate it, it's going wasted, or you can reuse it
every week? No, it's a real challenge because they are modifying every week, every 2 weeks the code and the deobfuscation part. They are increasing the difficulty, so you have to find that. But at some point of time, it's tiring. Yeah, it's a boring game because it's always the same stuff, and you have to do the work, redo the work, redo the work, etc. But as you said, on the other parts, I'm investing a lot how to bypass this CDP issue. And as you say, there is a lot of new library. I'm interested also how to patch the Chromium browsers. That's also a lead that I'm following to write this kind of patching framework, open source patching framework from Chrome. So you can bypass some kind of protections that you are on the CDP protocol and so on. So that's the goal is to modify the V8 engine and to avoid that antibot detects that you are modifying the behaviors. That's what doing multi-login, other browsing custom browser companies, they are modifying the browser, the V8 engine. So when you have some signal monitoring by the antibot, they are modifying the return value. And also the antibots add a lot of signal to detect that you are doing reverse engineering. And they also try to bypass this kind of signals.
That's interesting. It's something I didn't approach yet, but when I will have time, when I retire, I will try. So, as well,
you have to understand at the point of time, it takes me a lot of time. I'm more interested on the proxy side and doing Scrapoxy, but you have to understand how antibots are executing JavaScript, which signals they are monitoring, especially what Antoine published on the CDP protocols, which is very interesting how they track that. And there is also a lot of other techniques. Yes, and that's always moving, you know. And regarding your question on having a perfect anti-bot solutions, no, there is no perfect bot solutions. You know that. It's a cat and mouse game.
Yes, also there is another layer of difficulty, not only sending the right fingerprint to the antibot, but also behaving in the browser like a human, because there are sophisticated antibots that detects your mouse movement, your typing speed, and whatever. And how can we create a bot that behaves like a human? Are there, again, any package, any solution that can help in this? Or because on the antibot side, I think it's difficult to keep track of these things and give a response in milliseconds to block you. But they do this sometimes. So how can we do it?
Yes, they track how you navigate on the website. I don't have the antibot code. It's only guess. But I think they are doing that with machine learning patterns. You know, when you have Android applications connecting to a website, you have normal user connecting to a website, and you have bot. It's mainly 3 categories, and you have a lot of traffic on user and on Android application and browsers. So it's always the same recurring pattern coming. And when the bot is going to different web page, starting perhaps with a deep link, clearly you have outliers doing different behaviors, and you can have 99% sure that it's a bot. So you can block that. And so what the bot will do is to reproduce the behavior. So going to the search engine, or perhaps to click on some button, not random button, but a real user experience and trying to buy the ticket to get the prices. And that's clearly difficult for antibot to detect them if the previous layer are correctly emulated. What I'm saying is it's a matter of volume. When you are trying to collect 100 requests, 1,000 requests, okay, you can stay below the radars. But at some point of time, if you want to have 20 million requests a day, you will be spotted by the antibot. It's impossible. So the goal is to push far the detections. So to stay a maximum below the radar, but you will be detected and you will be blocked. So you switch to another session, IP address, whatever, and you maximize the number of requests. That's what you can do clearly when you are doing a lot of billion of requests. And behavior tracking, you will be detected with that. There is no way to avoid that.
Yes, I've seen packages like Ghost Cursor for the mouse movement that can draw. Because when you use the mouse to click somewhere on the page using Playwright, the line is straight. Also, probably there is not even the line. The browser detects the mouse from here to then without any drawing of the line.
Yes.
Instead, with the Ghost Cursor package for Playwright, I wrote about it sometimes some months ago, and the mouse movement is more like it's curved like one person could do, but again, it's slow. It's slow. It's a slow package because it's math.
It's difficult to avoid. It was interesting also to understand how antibot work. In fact, what you're trying to do is to have a cookie, because antibots work like that. So they validate your session, and when you are validated, there is no protection, in fact, or there is less protections. They continue to do the behavior, but not at the same accuracy. So you try to get a good session, so not to have to forge a cookie because it's a UID generated. So you try to send good signals, you send your correct mouse movements. And when you have a good session, you can send deep link and get all information until you're banned, and you restart these mechanisms. But the antibots are improving, and they reduce the number of requests that you can do in the interval. So that's why they are benching every 5 seconds, every 2 seconds now, the behavior of the users. And yes, that's detected. And when you are using Puppeteer, the very interesting part is Puppeteer or Playwright is not using real mouse movement. It's using events. So it's hijacking the console and sending events. So that's why most of the time you add a new layer which pilot the keyboard and the mouse, the real virtual. So you have real events. In fact, because you can also hijack, the antibot can observe the different events and say, okay, it's a Puppeteer event, it's a Playwright event. So yes, it's automations.
Great. Well, I think we've covered all the aspects of proxies and antibots. Again, thank you so much for being here today. And it's always a pleasure to hear you and see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to discuss with you.
Thank you so much. We'll see you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Pierre.